I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker, I've got to say, whilst I share the sentiments of Mr Goldsmith's speech, it was disappointing in one particular way, in that members on this side had raised a number of key questions. The Minister, throughout the debate, I don't think took a call at all. One of the concerns that both Mr Parker and myself raised were issues around credit unions, compliance costs around credit unions. No Minister decided to take a call at all. The differentiating factors and different strictures around credit unions, their legislative framework, how they operate in a completely different way, a different model, a cooperative model. And these are pretty venerable institutions. I'm sure we all have people in our respective patches and constituencies who are members of these institutions who have invested wisely, and also, I should say, these credit unions do a lot for their communities. Now, what we simply asked on this side was for some rationale and some assurance around why these credit unions and friendly societies would be placed within this Act. I don't think that's too much to ask of highly paid ministers with highly professional, knowledgeable officials behind them, but it's got to a point where the Minister couldn't even sort of turn around, ask his officials for the answer and give us some assurance, nor could the now Chair of FEC rather than stand up, run through a few cursory items, sit down and, you know, raise the white flag. So it is disappointing, because I know that some of the submissions from the New Zealand Association of Credit Unions on behalf of its members and others raised some very valid points, and would have appreciated, I think, as we go forward and process this legislation, some sort of assurance for the record or rationale. But no one, including, I believe, Mr Hayes is a member of FEC still, I think, Ms Barry, Mr Goldsmith, others, no one, but more especially the ultimate responsibility as the Minister and the Chair, was prepared to even give lip service to that request and just provide some background for the record in the committee stages or the third reading. I've got to say that's disappointing. Mr Goldsmith is right. There is widespread support across the House for this bill, but if we are at a stage where we can't raise where we raise valid questions without politics, simply to try and secure some level of confidence for various entities in the community, and ministers simply sit there at 10 past 11 or 10 past 11 and just, you know, read their papers and don't even bother to seek the information, even if they're not the minister with portfolio responsibility, then you've got to say that's a bit rough. Not too rough on us, because we're not the ones with our backsides on the line. The credit unions are, and friendly societies are. And their members will be looking at changes that are made, and their members will actually be saying, what does this mean for us? Are we going to have to change? What will these prudential requirements mean for us in terms of our investment structure, in terms of our appointments, in terms of how we manage funds and take deposits? And as my colleague Claire Curran says, obviously the government over there doesn't really care about that end of town. Or even though that end of town, credit unions and friendly societies are a bit bigger, and they have substantial funds under management than many other entities in our community. So I would have thought that in the spirit of bipartisan or non-partisanship that this bill has engendered, that ministers would have got up, or members of the Select Committee, and simply put on the record the rationale for this. It would have been helpful. Maybe it's going to happen when I sit down and a government speaker takes the next call. That would be helpful, and I make that genuine plea to the next government speaker. Could they provide that advice on the record? Mr Hayes, Ms Barry, or Mr Goldsmith's already spoken, somebody on the Select Committee, could they take some advice from the Minister's officials? But I'm sure Mr Hayes will, because he's a reasonably responsible joker. Could he actually, in his speech, if he's allowed to, get up and give that rationale as to why these credit unions are going to be lumped into this? Pretty simple request, no politics in it. We'll accept the nature of it and take the information. You know, we are all supporting. I don't think there's anybody in this House who's not supporting this bill, but that would be a courtesy to those credit unions, who will be the ones, and to the listeners at home, who will be the ones who have to implement this legislation. And as I think it was the credit unions rightly said in one of their submissions, or perhaps in the media, it'll be the entities that didn't collapse, as I said in the committee stage, that pay for this. Not the bad guys that did collapse. It'll be the survivors including the credit unions, who acted appropriately, who were fiscally conservative, who guard with a great deal of pride their members as investors, their members' investments and money. They're the ones that are going to have to bite the bullet on this. And even if it is appropriate, and it may well be, I think they are owed a duty of care from this Parliament and this government to ascertain why they're lumped in. They raised some very, very solid points. Different model, different membership structure, different investment structure, cooperative model, different priorities, fiscally conservative with the investments. All the things you'd have to say that some of the big end of town are actually lacking, especially those who came a gutser through their own lack of financial foresight. So I'll conclude by simply making the request again for about the third time that some narrative be put down in a third reading speech from the government as to answer the points raised legitimately and professionally by credit unions. We'll support this bill, but I think as we're doing this, I know some want to get home over the other side. I think it is appropriate that proper information is put on the record of this House so that entities know what's going to happen and what they're up against and why they are caught by the sort of catch-all bill that this is. So I look forward to the next FEC member taking a call.
Good speech. I call the honourable member Dr. Russell Norman.